watch that afterwards and watch the broadcast.
Don't do it yet. Yeah, it is.
We're supposed to be backwards on it, Chris.
Oh, you're right, that's right. Backwards on this monitor.
I think we're gonna just do this tomorrow. Let's just bump this.
Play with tomorrow. Let's skip tomorrow.
Are you live?
Yeah, I'm live.
So where do I find it on here?
You should be able to go to
On our channel.
I'm just waiting for him to come.
I don't know.
On live, there's 6 people watching.
Are you public?
Yes, it's public.
You got chat on? Zoom on with there, it's just gave a thumbs up.
Zoom.
How come I can't see it on our channel? This is where we direct.
Oh, did any of you have an issue getting in? No? Okay.
Yeah, I just spoke with mine maybe like 10 minutes ago.
Okay.
Because she was having trouble logging in.
He might have to refresh his browser or something. Because last week, remember?
I'm just resending the link again.
I can't shut my whole browser down because I got Zoom.
Yeah. You got sound from there. Yeah, no, I see sound. I can't hear it, obviously, but I can see it.
Here we go. I got it.
Look here.
I know, but
Did it flip?
yeah, it's fine.
Okay.
But I can, when I said that, I could hear myself. Is that going out over here?
I don't hear music or anything.
We can't, this is not gonna work. This whole conversation is going out over YouTube.
Oh, Connor just said he's waiting for the host to accept. Mr. Mosier, I don't know if there's some in the waiting room or something. There he is.
Hello.
Hello.
How are you?
Hey, Beckett. Oh, now here comes everyone. Yay. Hi, Eddie. Hi, Connor. Hi, Jana. Who else do I have in here? Beckett. Sophia said her Zoom is updating right now. She said it says a few more seconds.
You know, they just choose the most perfect times to update your stuff, like your computer right before you got a test, or your Zoom right before you got like a Let's Talk Justice event. You know, just perfect.
Or like right before a crass GA, the laptop the school gives you is doing all the updates that it hasn't done for 6 months. That happens all the time.
You know, I think the IT department just looked at the schedule and says, "What's the worst possible time?"
Is this Maya right here with the lights in the corner? There she is. Okay.
I have to log in from my sister's iPad so it works.
Okay.
My phone's gonna overheat and break.
Oh no. Okay.
But I was trying to do it from my mom's computer, but it kept on saying that, like, since I've logged in through AACPS so many times and I'm not using my AACPS, it won't let me.
That's weird. Can you change the name on it to, instead of saying iPhone, to maybe say your name? Do you know how to do that?
Where? On here?
Like on your screen, it says iPhone instead of your name.
I'm gonna sign it to my sister's iPad and see if that works, and then it'll have my name on it.
No one's in the waiting room.
And then, okay, thank you. And then turn it, Connor. Yeah, you guys turn it horizontally too. Maya. Drake said it's asking him for a password.
It asked me for a password too. That's why it took me a second.
Okay, that's weird. Okay, hang on. Let me go in. I don't. Sophia said her Zoom is updating right now. She said it says a few more seconds.
You know, they just choose the most perfect times to update your stuff, like your computer right before you got a test, or your Zoom right before you got like a laptop justice event. You know, just for
Or like right before it crashed GA, the laptop the school gives you is doing all the updates that are network ones. That happens all the time. Okay, Rita's here. Hi,
Okay.
Sophia. Hi, Amaya.
What's the meeting ID?
Do you need it?
Yeah,
You're
to
in.
get into the thing with on my sister's iPad.
Oh, the meeting ID or password?
ID.
Okay, it's 8839
Okay.
9847
Okay.
4169.
Wait, huh? 4169. I need a password too.
Hang on for just a second. Mr. Mosier, check your phone. Guys, can you all mute for a second?
This is all coming over YouTube, all this conversation. I don't know either.
Everything is muted, all turned down. You could say it right now.
I can't though. I gotta go over instructions with them. I can't. I don't know what to do.
Hey, Sophia, can you turn your camera?
So John and Rita, turn your cameras on, please. So who are we missing?
Isa and Samaya. Samaya, sorry.
Samaya's here, right? No?
No, not yet. She said she might be closer to the start time. Just, I'll text you offline.
Yeah, people are texting me, telling me they can hear all this conversation.
Yes, me too.
Good evening. Welcome to the first Let's Talk Justice Student Forum. This event has been organized by student leaders across the county and made possible with support from the school system and Board of Education. Let's Talk Justice, Student Stories, Student Voices has been created as a forum for students to discuss racism and social justice. Beginning with a student-led panel planning committee, the vision of Let's Talk Justice quickly developed into a place where students will be able to have a voice about various social issues and injustices. I want to make clear that we are here tonight because George Floyd was killed 22 days ago. The students on this panel and I honor him and are still mourning his unjust death. I know the passing of George Floyd and the activism following it has opened my eyes to a plethora of problems that plague our nation, including our Anne Arundel County community. While it is unsettling and frightening to see videos documenting horrific encounters of police brutality, the sad truth is that for many of our Black brothers and sisters, this is a daily reality. However, the students of this county have understood this reality and are here today to fight systemic racism and oppression with conversations on systemic change. To the viewers at home, I know this conversation is difficult. For some of you, it may be one you have been too afraid to be a part of. So I congratulate you on taking initiative to be an active listener in this fight. For others, it's one you are tired of screaming and yelling about, and it may feel like no one's listening. I ask you to hang on and have hope because I'm certain that the stories shared tonight will make you feel less alone in this fight. I will conclude on a personal note. Sometimes I feel like I'm just a person of color in a white America, and then I remind myself that I am Indian, Muslim American. I have a right to the greatness of this nation just as much as any other American, and thus I have a responsibility to fight for its betterment even when times get tough. I have been stopped at airports. I've been looked at funny. I wonder how many opportunities have been taken from me just because of the way I look. I recall one specific experience of racism that has stuck with me. I was in the United States Senate building cafeteria when an old white man began screaming at my friends and I, telling us that we were bloody immigrants and that we should go back to where we came from. At that moment, I wanted to tell him back to where I was born, a few miles from here, but I didn't because I was afraid. I had seen too many videos of kids being beat up or girls' hijabs being snatched off to make that mistake. So I looked around for help and I saw multiple police officers watching the crowd, but none of them told the man to stop. In fact, none of the Senate building staff nor any of the visitors stopped him. I held my head high and walked away. I share this story for two reasons. The first, that this is an act of racism that did not take my life, but racism in our policing system takes Black lives every day. Second, to demonstrate that racism exists in our society and is perpetuated when we say nothing to stop it. That is why we are having this conversation today, so more people know our stories and join us in this fight for change. With that, I will turn it over to our SMOB-elect, Drake Smith, who will be moderating tonight's discussion.
Thanks, Rita. Good evening, everyone. My name is Drake Smith. I'm the current president of the Anne Arundel County NAACP Youth and College Division, and starting July 1st, I will have the pleasure of serving you as your next student member of the Board of Education. I will be your moderator for tonight's event. As Rita said, we are here to talk about systemic change. Over the next 2 hours, you will hear real candid responses from students across the county on a wide range of race-related topics. And with that, let's begin. We will begin by going around the panel for each panelist to introduce themselves and also answer the first question of the night. In a few words, describe how you're feeling. We will start with Amaya.
Hi, I'm Amaya Mattering. I'm a junior rising senior at Northeast High School, and I'm African American and Asian American. I'm Filipino, which is also known as Native Pacific Islander. A few words I'm feeling towards tonight is anxious, but mostly excited. And I hope you guys can learn something.
Beckett.
Hi, I'm Beckett Hummer. I'm a rising sophomore at Meade High School. I'm a white female, and I'm feeling optimistic for the discussion we're about to have.
Brenton.
Hi, everyone. My name is Brenton Mead. I am an 8th grade student at MacArthur Middle School. I identify as African American, and I am anxious but hopeful.
Camille.
Hi, my name is Camille Carter. I'm a North County STEM rising senior. One emotion I feel right now is exhausted with the state of America, but feeling optimistic that we're having these conversations.
Connor.
Hello, everyone. My name is Connor Curran. I am a rising senior at Old Mill High School. I'm a white male, and I am feeling inspired from the amount of activism that we have in this group tonight and kind of seeing the results of that.
Damaya.
Hi, everyone. My name is Damaya Williams. I am a African American female. I am a rising senior at Chesapeake High School, and feelings that I have for tonight, I'm very excited and hopeful that people will learn something from this.
Edward.
Hi, my name is Edward Ah. I am a rising senior at Arundel High School, and I am frustrated with the state of America today, and I am hopeful that today's discussions will lead to more systemic change.
Issa. Issa's not here right now. Janae.
Hi, my name is Jana Monroe. I'm a freshman, a rising sophomore at Savannah High School. I'm an African American female, and I feel anxious about this panel tonight, but I feel very exhausted by having to explain my side of the story constantly over and over again in America.
John.
Hey, my name is John. I'm a rising senior at Arundel High School. I identify as an African American male. I'm pretty psyched about today. It's gonna be fun.
Maya.
Hi, I'm Maya Blackshear. I am going into the 8th grade at, I don't know yet, and I identify as an African American and Caribbean female. And a couple words to describe how I'm feeling right now is upset that it has to come to what we're doing right now to get change, but also proud that we're one step forward into hopefully getting all of this sorted out and getting justice for George Floyd.
Sophia.
Hi, my name is Sophia Walla. I am a rising senior at Old Mill High School, part of the IB program. I identify as an Pakistani American as well as being a Muslim American. And a word to describe how I'm feeling right now is passionate.
Sumaya.
Hello, I'm Sumaya Mordecai. I'm a Black Muslim female and a recent graduate of Arundel High School. I will describe how I'm feeling tonight is, I would say, numb a little bit because of how often that events like this happen, but also hopeful that maybe people will get to see, you know, just how important it is for us to have this discussion and change.
Great. Those are our panelists for tonight. As you've seen, many panelists are frustrated, confused, exhausted, but then more, they're hopeful and proud for the future. So let's see what tonight really has to hold, and hopefully we have a really dynamic conversation. Before we proceed, I want to remind anyone watching on YouTube to please introduce yourself in the comments. We want to hear from you as well. And throughout the discussion, feel free to type any question in the chat that we will answer towards the end. Now let's move on to our second question. How has your mental health been affected by the events of the past few months? Our first panelist is Brenton.
So this whole experience with George Floyd brought back a lot of emotions that I felt when I was in the 3rd grade. So maybe about 3 years ago, I had thoughts of suicide because of the way African Americans were treated. I learned about the death of Freddie Gray in my 3rd grade classroom while we were doing a guided reading assignment. And as time went on throughout my elementary school career, I started to realize the way African Americans were treated and how broken our justice system is today. I've mastered it for the past 3 years. I've learned how to sit still and smile through all of it. And it's easy to see how, or it's pretty hard to imagine that someone like me with good grades and, you know, a star student would feel that way. When I went into private therapy to deal with my thoughts, the therapist was white, so I felt I couldn't express fully how I felt because I didn't think they would be able to understand me. I get apprehensive even today when I see a police officer with some sort of weapon that could cause fatal harm. So this really brought back a plethora of emotions that I felt back then, and I hope that what I shared today can impact someone for the greater good.
Well, thank you, Brenton, for sharing. I know that was really hard to share thoughts like that, and we really appreciate it. Our next panelist is Samaya.
These feelings have these events have put me in a state of paranoia. You know, it's very hard to sleep or even live being a Black American in society because you feel like you can't do anything. Like, can't go out in public without being a target. You can't even be in your house watching TV without being a target in your own home. So it's it's very scary. It's like every moment I'm watching my back and I have this constant thought, like any given moment, some cop can, not even a cop, but I can get my life taken by a white person and they won't be prosecuted for what they did. So it's just, I feel like that's a thought that many people have, many people of color, especially Black people have with these events. And I know that's what I have, like constant paranoia and anxiety when it comes to stuff like that.
Thank you. John?
Yeah, I guess the way to start this is when this all kind of started, it was I was kind of conflicted with this whole situation, and I think the biggest reason why was because for the longest time I didn't really know how to think about these types of things because I've never been personally. I had very limited kind of exposure to this type of stuff, hand in hand, and I've never been. I mean, I've obviously been in contact with police before, but I never had I was never on that side of the line. So when I first saw this and I watched the original video, it was difficult because you see the life being taken out of someone in that 10-minute video, and it was difficult. And I talked to my dad, I talked to my mom. They all had the same kind of reaction, and so it was hard to talk about for a while. Which any of my close friends know. I'm not really speechless on anything, any type of event, any issue, even small ones I talk about all the time. I always like to give my opinion, but this was actually the first issue I was afraid to give my opinion because I didn't know how anyone else would feel. So this is kind of this whole talk is kind of therapeutic for me. You know what I'm saying?
Well, hopefully, this really boosts your activism. So would any other panelists like to respond to the question? And once again, the question is, how has your mental health been affected by the events of the past few months? No one? Okay, we'll move on to the an 11th grader from Glen Burnie High School asks, do you think that police brutality is a slow-moving genocide? We'll start with Samaya.
I believe it is a slow-moving genocide. I fully believe it because if we look at when Florida, the Florida Police Department got, called out for using Black men's mugshots as shooting targets. And it's kind of built into that curriculum, kind of. And you see how many police officers are getting away with the murders of Black men and women countless times, paid layoffs and stuff like that. So it's definitely a slow genocide, and it's very much excused in America. And the targets, this isn't George Floyd, he wasn't the first one, but like this one I feel is sparking the most outrage because this has been happening like every day before that has happened. So it's like kind of, I would say, more toned down the rates, because even yesterday with the black man who was shot in the Wendy's parking lot, you know, it's just it's really a genocide. Like they're taking black lives. People are harvesting black organs, you know, hanging black people. It's always been this constant genocide, and it's like we're endangered species. Like people will care more about animals than they do about human beings.
Thank you for that. Camille?
So, no, I don't think police brutality is a slow-moving genocide. I think it's been fast from the beginning. So since 2014, roughly 7,666 people have been killed by the police. Of those, 25 resulted in a conviction for the officers, and 74 cases went to court and ended with no conviction, which if we do the math, that means roughly 98% of deaths at the hands of police resulted in no punishment for the officers. So no, I don't think police brutality is a slow-moving genocide. It's been fast since modern day policing has started. However, in Maryland, I think we like to feel like we're more progressive than we actually are because of how culturally diverse our schools are. At least I know North County is very culturally diverse. But in Maryland, African Americans make up 29% of the population, but account for 63% of police killings. That's an extremely disproportionate amount. And in America, if we want to talk about that as a total, African Americans are 2.5 times more likely to be killed by the police, despite making up 13% of the population. Which means if you think about it, if you took a bag and put 10 marbles in it, made one of the marbles black and made the other 9 marbles white, you are 2.5 times more likely to pick out that black marble, if you're the police hypothetically, than you are to pick out the other 9 white marbles, despite there being more white marbles than there are black. So no, I think at the beginning of this, policing started on practices of slave catching. It's just a modern day slave catching if you really think about it. So no, I think police have been killing black people since the inception and have been killing people of color since the inception. It's just as a society, we've grown more aware of it and we've decided that's not something that we want to continue doing.
Thank you, Camille. You know, the facts are always helpful. Demaya?
Police brutality has been going on since way before we were born. Like Camille said, it's basically slave catching. So it's a slow-moving genocide, but it's getting faster and faster, and it's happening everywhere. It can honestly happen in our own backyards, and nothing will happen, ever. So we honestly need to change that.
Thank you. Brenton?
I would say that police brutality is also a psychological genocide. If we look at the past 2 weeks, I've seen news reports of 4 black men hanging from trees, which makes it look like they're lynchings. And we still don't know whether they were actual suicides or whether they were actually lynched. And compared to stories like mine, where police brutality has taken a toll on my mental and emotional health, I would say that probably it affects black boys and black men and even black women to the point where it drives them to the point where I was, where you're considering hurting yourself to erase the trauma that you may experience because of a white police officer.
Wow, thank you for that. Because oftentimes we tend to forget, you know, the psychological aspect. Would any other panelists like to respond to the question? And once again, the question is, do you think that police brutality is a slow-moving genocide? No one, thanks. The next question is, a Lindale Middle student wants to know, do you think people can discriminate without even knowing it? Is it like unconscious bias? Our first panelist is Sophia.
I personally, for a fact, I know that I think that people can discriminate without even knowing it. One big example is microaggressions. People saying stuff but they don't realize it's actually offensive. And you're at the point where when like someone says it to you, you're kind of like I don't know if I should take that the right way or the wrong way, because like they made it seem like it was a compliment, but it really wasn't. It was like saying like, oh, you're cute for an Asian person or whatever, things like that. Those are microaggressions. Another thing is like things that people like tend to do based on what they know. So with the stereotype that Black men rob people, so like have you seen like there's like things I've seen where a lady will just grab her purse really tight when they see a Black man entering the elevator, which that's not okay. That's something that she did unconsciously, but she knew she was doing it because obviously it's a physical thing that she had to do. So I 100% do believe that people can discriminate without even knowing it.
Amaya?
I agree with Sophia. Unconsciously discriminating against someone is called implicit bias, and it's the brain's natural tendency to separate people or look at people in like separate groups or things in nature in general. And like Sophia said, it can result in microaggressions, which are things that typically go over people's heads, like subtle comments that are actually discriminatory or hurtful. Like people ask, like, where are you from? And what they mean to ask is like, what's your ethnicity? And it makes people of color feel like they're not from here, they don't belong here, but they don't know that it's hurtful. But I want people to know that implicit bias and microaggressions is different from racism. Racism is like unfair prejudice. It's meant to be hateful. It's purposeful, conscious discrimination, and it's meant to be hateful and derogatory towards people. You can't accidentally be racist. Implicit bias is like unconscious.
Thank you for the clarification. Jaina?
Implicit bias, what it's called, is absolutely real. It's happened to probably like almost every minority that I know, every single like Black person that I know. It's like saying, oh wow, like you can speak really good for a Black girl, or look, you can speak really good for like an Asian person. You're not conscious about it. It's not like Amaya said, it's not directly racist, but it's still it's not as bad, but it's still very much bad because people don't know what they're doing it, and they already learned it. So it's kind of difficult to unlearn, and it's a very large problem in school systems because that's a one way how administrators and staff and teachers discriminate against students by saying like, oh, you did really well, like you did really well. Oh, I didn't really expect like a Mexican person to do that well. And it's not a good thing. People think that the comments are harmless, and they usually just go right over your head, and it's gone right over my head too, because you don't know it, and you don't know how to respond to it at that exact moment until you process it later. But yes, it is a very big and large problem.
And Maya?
I completely agree with all the people before me that you kind of like, when you think about it, a lot of people have grown up listening to these terms and all these derogatory terms saying that other people are like, for instance, I have been told plenty of times that I talk like a white girl when I don't really think of it as that. I think of it as I talk proper. I talk like I don't fail English class. And I just think that there's no reason that just because I'm African American and just because people say that I've grown up in the ghetto, so to speak, it doesn't mean that I have to talk ghetto or I have to talk like I'm ratchet, so-called, because I'm African American. I could have a country accent. I could talk like I'm from the islands. I could talk however I want to talk, for the fact that that's where I grew up. I grew up speaking proper. I grew up speaking like, my parents always used to get on me for saying like y'all and things like that. So I'm not going to talk how so-called other African Americans talk, but that doesn't mean that I talk white, so to say. Like, and I know a lot of people, you kind of grow up in it, so you don't know the difference between not discriminating without even knowing and discriminating and you knowing it, because you've grown up around it your whole entire life, that per se a young child sees their older sibling doing it or their parents doing it or a friend or a neighbor, and their automatic idea is, oh, it's just a joke, or, you know, he's just saying it to say it, like it's not hurting anybody, when in reality people may take it the way that you're not trying to say it, and that could hurt somebody's feelings, or even worse, it can make somebody want to hurt themselves. So I think that although you've grown up around it, I think it is best to educate students and let students know that, you know, what you're doing is wrong, regardless. I know you've grown up around it, but it's still wrong at the end of the day, because you may be hurting somebody else's feelings, and just because you think it's not wrong, or you're thinking of it as a joke or something like that, somebody may take it a lot more seriously than you would.
Thank you, Maya. So, Maya, you talked about how we can try to solve it by just talking about it. But does any other panelists maybe have a solution to implicit bias? How we can try to curb the problem in the school systems? Connor?
I feel like we can implement more of our implicit bias trainings that we've been doing through the Office of Equity and Accelerated Student Achievement. I feel like if we can kind of do more of those and kind of make it more important for teachers to kind of take these practices within their own classrooms, and not just another PDF that they have to go through.
Any other panelists?
I just wanted to share quickly, if that's okay with Drake, on me hopping in, that when it comes to educating about implicit bias, the best way to do it is giving students of color an opportunity to speak about their stories. I know what it's like to sit in a classroom and be the only person of color there, and how hesitant you are to share what you've been through. But to encourage those students to go out and say those things, and create an environment where they feel comfortable in sharing their stories, is the only way a white person will know when they're being wrong, is if someone corrects them. So I think allowing our schools and the spaces that we're in to have that comfort is definitely a step forward.
Great, thank you, Rita. Well, thank you for those solutions. And while we're on the topic of solutions, let's get to one of our online questions. A student from Severna Park asks, what can I do as a white person from a majority white high school, Severna Park, to help fight racism? So this can be for any of the panelists. Camille, and then Jana.
So I think as a white person, something that you can do to help educate your fellow white people. I think that if you're learning from Black people and people of color and letting them speak first and learning their information and getting information from correct sources and making sure that you're not pushing out false information, because I know how pretty the Instagram story things look, where you can have all this fun text and you can say things, but if you're pushing out false information, it doesn't help the cause. If anything, it takes back and helps hurting and ends up hurting your cause. Just, I say, help educate your friends and make sure that the information that you're getting is not false information.
Jana?
Okay, I go to Severna Park High School, and so I can kind of like talk about it as like a personal thing, but we just need to be like straightforward and just kind of just tell them what not to do and what to do, and give experiences of minorities, like start like a Black Student Union, which I've been thinking about doing, and just like minorities talking about their experiences that they've experienced at any like schools in the county or at Severna Park schools. And it really just like opens people's eyes to stuff. And also what Camille was talking about, like those pretty like little Instagram fonts and stuff like Coiny or whatever on there. And it's just like, oh, like stop being racist, as like, and they put it on their Instagram story. It doesn't really do anything. People are just like, oh, well, that looks cute, but they're not really going to like think about it. And it's not as effective as just talking about it straight up to a group of people or just doing it one-on-one. I don't think that the class, like if you were to talk about it like in a class, it should be a mandatory class, but you need to get people who've experienced racism and experienced implicit bias and all this type of stuff to educate people who can never experience it. It just needs to be a more hands-on thing, you know?
Mm-hmm. Totally agree, add substance to the post. Sophia?
I feel like one big thing that people can do, especially if you are a white person and you are seeing another white person say something racist, saying the N-word, make sure you call them out for it and not just let it slide by just because there's no Black person there. There's no one that they're directly talking to or directly in the room. That's one thing. And then also not being a performative activist for like the Black Lives Matter movement and things like that. Not because a black screen is not going to do anything. You posting a black screen but not posting anything else it's not going to do anything. So understanding what you can do, going to the protests if you can, obviously, watching, like, one way people are saying to donate, and if you don't have any money, is to watch YouTube videos, watch all the ads of the YouTube videos. If you even search up, I forgot what you search up, but if you search some keywords, you can get videos where they're like, if you view this, we will donate all the money to the Black Lives Matter movement, things like that. And just making sure, again, to call out people when they are being racist, even if there's not the person that they're directly targeting in that room.
Well, thank you, Sophia. You know, the term performative activism, I think there's another term, slacktivism, you know, where you just post and nothing else. But you can also do a multitude of things. Like you said, talk about it, watch videos, educate yourself. But also, if you don't want to go to protests, also maybe send an email to your legislature. So any other responses to the question? Connor?
As a white person myself, I've kind of had to go through this process myself. So the biggest thing that I've tried to do is just listen to the experiences that I have not had to face and kind of learn from those experiences and kind of educate as many people as I can so that we're all on the same page.
Thank you, Connor. Beckett?
So to piggyback on what Camille and Sophia and Connor all said, one of the most important things is just listen to others and have these uncomfortable conversations, because if it's uncomfortable, that means it's worth having, and it's worth bringing up these topics to people who might not usually face these conversations, because just because these issues, you don't think they directly impact you, that does not mean they don't exist. So having these conversations and being an ally to others and learning firsthand is one of the most important steps. And like Connor said, a lot of white people are struggling to speak up or to bring up their voices because they don't want to say the wrong thing. But the thing about speaking up is you learn. If you say the wrong thing, you learn from that, and you have other people teach you and educate you. So I think everyone, no matter what your skin color is, no matter what your background is, has a part to play in this movement. And this is not about politics. This is about human rights, and everyone is in this together.
Very well spoken, Beckett. That's kind of why we try to pick a diverse, panel. Any other panelists? Brenton?
As a person who's going to a majority white high school next year, I can say this. One way to get more perspectives is to advocate for things like magnet programs. I can assure you that there are lots of people of color who would love to come to Severna Park High School, but some can't go there because of either their economic status or because there's no magnet programs there. And the only reason I'm going to one of the best high schools in the county is because I applied for the magnet program there. So even simple things like that allow for more people of color to be drawn in is something you could do to be effective.
Thank you, Brenton. Demaya, would you like to speak?
So, coming from a predominantly remotely Caucasian school, and there is a very small minority at the school, and speaking up about it, it's hard, yes, but it is something that needs to be done. And like Sophia says, even if you are not African American, no matter what race you are, if you see somebody speaking out of the name or something, you need to speak up and you need to say something, no matter who's around, no matter what you will feel after. It's in the moment and it needs to be heard. It needs to be said.
Thank you, Demaya. Powerful. And our next question is, this one was submitted from a panelist. They wonder if we have ever experienced a teacher not believing you simply because of your race. And our first panelist is Jaina.
Okay, so I don't think I've really recognized me experiencing that, but I've definitely experienced that. It probably just went over my head, implicit bias. But only one time, the one time I really remember teacher not believing in me was about 5th grade. There was a sub during testing, standardized testing, and he was making these insanely obvious racist comments yo mama jokes about being too black and stuff. And I was asking him a question about something, and he goes, "Oh, that's right. He's like, I didn't really think you would get that as a black girl." And it just completely went over my head until like a few months ago where I was like, wow, that was really, really, really biased. And he was like obviously racist and he got fired. But anyways, sorry. But it does happen a lot, and going to a predominantly white school, I know it happens to more people than I actually know. And it's probably happened to me, but I don't really like recognize it. But once again, this is implicit bias. It needs something to be fixed. It's just fueled by harmful, incorrect stereotypes that have gone on for years, like 400 years worth of like oppression and stuff. And it really does hurt people because then it makes them think that they can't achieve what they think that they can achieve and achieve things that they know that they can achieve. It's really harmful and it should really stop.
Thank you, Jana, for sharing. Connor?
So personally, I've never experienced a teacher not believing me because of my race. That is a privilege that I have as a white person. Many times my friends of colors have been stopped in the halls and asked for a pass for no reason. This semester, I was an aide before all the coronavirus hit, and we didn't have our passes, and I was never stopped when I was going around the entire school making copies and delivering materials during the entire period. These are things that I've seen, and we must realize that race is not something that affects your ability to perform in the classroom. We must make sure that our teachers recognize their implicit biases and microaggressions in the classroom to make sure every child feels welcome in the learning environment so that they can thrive and prosper in this world.
Thank you, Connor. And to all the teachers watching, maybe just think about what you say. I know a lot of you are very thoughtful, but some, maybe just take a little extra time. Issa?
No, I gave my spot on this question to Brenton.
You did? Okay, Brenton?
I'm not, I don't think I've ever experienced anything like that before. It may have just gone over my head. I mean, I haven't been in the public school system as long as everybody else probably has. But I can say, like Drake has said, teachers, be mindful of what you say, because that may shatter one person of color or one student of color's worldview of themselves and what their potential could be.
Thank you. Camille?
Oh, I've never, a teacher has never come out of their mouth and said something explicitly racist to me, but it's more about the smaller remarks that they say, like things like, I asked the teacher if I could finish my freshman year. I'm a rising senior now. I asked the teacher if I could finish an assignment at home, and she responded that the assignment needed to have a computer, and she said, you probably don't have a computer at home, do you? I have a computer at home. I am off of Zoom on a computer, but it's the small things like that. I just want, like everyone said to the teachers, I just want you to realize how many of the students on here that just answer that question that I've said something along the lines of, I probably have, it went over my head for so long. And if students can acknowledge the fact that they've had things said to them that have gone over their head, I just think that we should take a look at our education system and take a look at why students feel that way when that shouldn't be something that's happening, especially at the level that we are.
Thank you, Camille. And while we're on that, let's move to our next online question. We're all high school students, but a viewer is wondering what can be done to address these issues at the elementary level. Would any panelists like to respond? Let's go, John.
All right, yeah. I think a really good way. You said, is there any asking for solutions?
Yeah, they say, what can be done to address these issues at the elementary level? So solutions or ideas.
Yeah. I really think a big thing you can start at the elementary schools is kind of starting that it's removing, I know I'm going to get a little bit of class for this, but removing race out of the question and just focusing on just respect within each other and kind of, I'm gonna get class for this, but kind of focusing on love within each other, not the love you see on the TV shows and movies, but just love within each other. It doesn't even have to be a romantic relationship, but a friendship. It's a camaraderie. It's something that, at least in Arundel High School, we enforce a lot, and it's something that in our signature classes, we always try to enforce this camaraderie and love within each other, and it seems to work really well.
Thank you, John. Anyone else? Amaya?
When I transferred elementary schools in the 3rd grade, I went into a class, maybe even all of the 3rd grade, only had like 3 or 4 Black people, and there was only like 1 or 2 other people of color in my entire grade level. So some comments that happened, because I was that young, like girls would say like, oh, why do you curl your hair every day? Because they didn't understand that my hair is naturally curly, or like, oh, why is your hair so frizzy and stuff like that. I think teachers should be trained to like see stuff like that and correct them, because I was so young that I didn't even like notice that these comments were like implicit biases or like microaggressions. And also just like amplify those students' voices so they feel like equal to the other students, because I felt very different transferring to a new school and having like so little people look like me and be like the same color skin as me. So just promoting inclusion and like correcting students because they don't know at that young of an age. It's just something that naturally happens.
Thanks for that. Beckett?
So I think that a great way that to start this conversation earlier is to start the education earlier. Like we have the GCC in high school and we have Equity Day that's more enforced in middle and high school, but we need to have like more talk and actual conversations with elementary schoolers, because you aren't born with hatred. You're taught hatred and you're taught other negative things like that. So if we have these conversations, because the younger you are, the more impressionable you are. So if you're taught like when you're younger about how everyone is equal and everyone is included, no matter what you look like, no matter what color skin you have, what type of hair you have, then it'll be like easier, and students will be able to realize that earlier. So we'll have less of these issues hopefully in the future when they're in older grades.
Thank you, Beckett. And to that point, to all the elementary school teachers watching, don't wait for the school board to implement a class in the elementary schools. Maybe take the time to teach about Black history, Asian history, and all the other histories, outside of February or their specific, months. And if you're already doing it, good for you. Maybe tell the teacher next door to do the same thing. Would anybody else like to respond? Let's go, Issa.
So I definitely would jump off of what Beckett was saying with this question. How kids at elementary school age, basically like all throughout the grade levels and stuff, but especially at that time, are super impressionable. Like what you show them is really what they think that they can do. So my thing is not necessarily, because we can have direct education like this, we'll teach you about the history of different people, and that's great. But I also think what we especially need to have is like kind of just behind the scenes things where the kids can see themselves in that environment. So like what I'm saying, for example, is like the holidays that you may choose to celebrate, or the types of role models that you show them, or the different conversations that you have. Because as that age, a teacher's job isn't just to teach them the material, but also to show them their culture. As a kid, you're learning, this is the country where I grew up in, and let's see what it's all about. But if you don't see that in your education, then that's going to start raising questions in your mind. Like, wait a minute, aren't I supposed to fit in this picture somewhere? And I kind of fit. I think it was Amaya who was saying, when I was in elementary school, I literally could count the number of colored people on one hand. I felt really alone, but we were tight. But you definitely had to get education about your culture outside of school as well. And you had to show it. It took an extra step when it doesn't really have to, and they can just show you that in school,
Thank you, Issa. That was very powerful. But real quick, Issa, you weren't here when we did the intro, so could you introduce yourself to the audience real quick?
Yeah, I'm sorry, guys. My name's Issa Liggins. I'm 17. I go to Chesapeake Science Point. Love to draw, be creative, and all that stuff. But yeah, I'm just here for the discussion.
Great, thank you, Issa. And we have time for one more panelist on this question. So we haven't heard from Edward in a while.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you, Edward.
Okay. As Amaya, Beckett, as Issa, everyone said, children are impressionable, but that doesn't mean that they don't understand or notice the differences between one another. When I grew up, I I was able to go to a primarily white and Asian middle school. And like Issa, like Amaya, I could literally count the amount of people who looked like me in my class. And they would call me like monkey boy. And I thought it was because, I was really athletic and I knew how to climb the monkey bars. But now that I'm looking at it, like it shows how even children can be able to understand like differences in race. And so it's up to the teacher to be able to, like what Issa said, like show everyone each other's culture, be able to form this sort of camaraderie, as Jean was able to say. Once they understand that besides the physical differences, that we are ultimately one human race, then along with, global community citizenship, if we could teach that in elementary school, that would be even better. Because once they understand this sense of unity, the earlier they understand this, the less hateful nuances will appear in high school and later on in life.
Thank you, Edward. As we all know, hate stems from ignorance. Rita, you said you wanted to add some remarks?
Yeah, I just wanted to pop in and talk about some things the school system's already doing. So I'm going to put on my board hat for a second. But when I was on my first day of school visits, I went to Hillsborough Elementary School, and I believe that the teacher had, flags lining her walls. It was a really welcoming environment. I believe it was a third grade classroom. And she was asking all the students to introduce themselves, where they're from, and what language they speak at home. And one of the students said that they speak Spanish. And some of the kids were like confused, right? Because at their houses, they speak English. And the teacher made very clear after the student told the class about themselves that it's okay that they speak Spanish. That's part of their cultural identity. And as a classroom, we're going to respect everybody here. And that's something that she placed in the students' minds the first day of school. And I think that sets a precedent for the rest of the year of how the students will carry themselves amongst one another. And I thought that was really important to see, because when I was in elementary school, that's not something I had a chance to do, and to see that progress is really awesome. In addition, though, at my elementary school, we did some awesome things that I think, despite being a predominantly white school, I really benefited from. And the first was we had a giving of thanks program. So around Thanksgiving, we would all hold a celebration of cultures. All the families would come to school and bring their food and talk about how they give thanks in their own culture. My parents were invited multiple times to come in and talk about how we pray, and India, and all different types of things. And our school was really willing to implement that cultural knowledge. I particularly remember a day where all the students of color and different cultures were asked to wear their cultural wear every single year. And it was a great thing that we look forward to, because as a young girl surrounded, in this world by pretty Disney girls, all I really thought for a while was blonde hair, blue eyes, like that's what's pretty. And my classmates have that and I don't have it. So I just think it was great to come in wearing my cultural wear, and for people to be able to appreciate that, and for me to feel beautiful as like a little 7-year-old girl in that environment. So those are some more positive things I wanted to add.
Thank you, Rita. It's always good to hear from you. Next, a Broadneck 10th grader asks, what are ways teachers could better address racism in our classroom? We touched on this a little, but next let's go to our panelists who signed up for this question. And the first one is Edward. Eddie.
Sorry, I was having technical issues. The best way teachers can handle racism, in fact, I believe that training starts from when you're young. And aside from parents, teachers are also responsible for the upbringing of not only a child, but a future citizen of the United States of America. And when they see instances of racism or discrimination, it is their duty to act as a mitigator, to let them understand that, hey, just because they're different, that doesn't mean that they're lesser. That doesn't mean that they're not welcome into the United States. It's not just the white states of America, it's the United States of America. Everyone from all different parts of the country come here in search of the American dream. And once they understand that, the sooner they understand that, the better they'll become, not only as people, but as citizens. And so I feel like it is up to the teacher to find ways, creative ways, to incorporate love and unity and to instill it into each of their students.
Thank you, Edward. That was very powerful. Amaya?
I think teachers, especially history teachers, but this can be any teacher during Black History Month or throughout the year during advisory, should make sure to emphasize accurate history and accurate things that happen, because people against the movement right now are quoting Martin Luther King and like other movements of the past and are being like, oh, violence doesn't solve anything. When if they looked, actually, the civil rights movement clearly was not 100% like peaceful. And Martin Luther King even said so himself, that riots were the language of the oppressed, which is condoning the behavior of today. So I think teaching accurate history, amplifying Black voices through Black literature and other things like that are easy ways that teachers can, help people not be hateful and not be discriminatory.
Thank you. Brenton?
I believe teachers can better address racism by just talking about it. I think our school system gives our advisory periods a little too much credit when we start to talk about problems being addressed in the school system, because basically in the minds of a student, it's like, here's my one period to sit and talk about maybe an elementary school lesson that I've heard over and over again over the past few years. Another thing I want to touch on is like when we talk about the year 2018, where we had Charlottesville, like right before the beginning of the school year, we had March for Our Lives in March when the Parkland shooting happened. And then we had the killing of Stephon Clark, a Black man who was shot because the officer who shot him mistook his cell phone for a gun. I remember that the Parkland shooting was addressed and we all came together as one school. But I didn't feel that they gave much credit to the racist issues that were happening. And that's one thing that our school system could do better on.
Thank you, Brenton. Samaya?
I know that the school needs to get rid, teachers need to forget about white fragileness, because that's that's their main issue that they have, is worrying about the feelings of white students. Like, it might sound harsh, but it's not about them at the end of the day. And if we're being completely honest, racism, we need to stop worrying about the tears and like the feelings, not even feelings, but just like, oh, I don't want to talk about this, so, or Timothy doesn't want to talk about this, so let's not talk about it because we're making him uncomfortable. We need to address these issues head on and not worry about, if it's gonna hurt the white kids' feelings. And also, I feel like we need to remove the bias and watch and really evaluate who is teaching the lessons, because I remember my first year taking my signature class, my teacher, who was like, she wasn't there the whole year, but she was there for the first beginning of the year. And I'm pretty sure it was Freddie Gray. I think it was Freddie Gray. It was either Freddie Gray or Stephon Clark. My teacher was like showing us the ugly and beauty of the protest that was happening around America. So she was talking about how her husband was a cop and how she showed like people throwing stuff at the cops and yelling at the cops was ugly, the ugly part of the protest. But little Black boys handing the cops, water bottles and everybody linking arms acting kumbaya was the beautiful part. So I think we need to evaluate who is teaching us these lessons, because we have these, subjects implemented, but then we have these crooked teachers who don't know what they're talking about, giving us a viewpoint from, I would say, conservative and just ignorant America, trying to teach, students of minority or students who are trying to become global citizens how to better themselves when they're just making the problem worse. So stop worrying about white tears and, take the bias out of your teachings, especially on a subject that you obviously don't know nothing about.
Thank you, Samir, for that. That was great. Just keep telling it like it is, and you should become a teacher because you'd be a great one. And we have another panelist for this, Beckett.
Yes, I just wanted to play off what some other people were saying, that we need to focus more on the history that's not usually focused on. Like, Black history in America does not start with slavery. So the first thing people are taught is about the slavery. And just like Columbus, like America was not started like by Columbus, We have these Native Americans who were here first. And so this is taught some, but I feel like there's too much focus on some of these, the wrong side of history, Like, obviously we need to focus on the goods and the bads of American history, but some of these, like, it's twisted and some students are focusing too much. Like, we need to put more, like, we have Black History Month, and I remember in elementary school, we had like all the hallways were like covered with like Black heroes from Maryland or things like that. But we need to focus on that year round as well. So like put more Black inventors, be taught what Juneteenth is, be taught all these different things. So students don't know like just about, oh, Black people were in America because of slavery. Like, we need to focus on the positives and how much they've contributed to the country and how much good is in America because of the African Americans in this country.
Well said, Beckett, because Black history is American history. Next, Edward again.
I'm sorry, I have a few things to add. Just like as Beckett said, just like as Amaya said, as teachers, you understand that you are you're empowering your student of their culture. You're telling them their history, and they should know, well, they are entitled to know everything about their history. That the civil rights movement wasn't just Martin Luther King politely asking America to stop being racist, and they were like, oh, okay, I guess I'll stop being racist. There's more than that. There's Malcolm X, there are the sit-ins, there's so many things that like need to be taught in the American, like the school curriculum. And it's all up to teachers to really raise a new generation that is not tied down by ignorance and hatred. In fact, also for teachers who happen to be white, please understand that you shouldn't ignore something because it makes yourself feel uncomfortable. As a teacher, like I said, you have to teach the full truth. And so please educate yourself. Please understand that it's not about you. It's about these children, the future. And once you can do that, once you could put it aside yourself to do and to be better for your children, then we're one step closer to the solution.
Thank you, Edward. And just to point out, just a disclaimer, this is not a teacher bashing session. To all the teachers that might feel offended, we're just giving you constructive criticism on how you can better educate us, the students. So we really thank you for that, Edward. And since we're on the topic of teacher education, how they can better educate us, a teacher actually asked, thinking about the school to prison pipeline, what structures can educators like me work on to implement differently, or actively decide not to enforce to work at dismantling structural racism? Would any panelists like to respond? Issa?
Okay, so what especially first came to my mind was something, I don't know if you guys heard it, it's this saying, I am what you say I am. So my thing is, as a teacher, they were talking about disrupting sort of societal ideas and standards. If you're going to tell someone about like even the kindergarten thing, even all the way up through high school and stuff and whatever, if you're going to tell someone over and over about themselves, then they're going to more likely adopt the characteristic that you're talking about. Whether it be over time, whether it be tomorrow, even if they don't, it might raise some type of doubt in their mind. For example, if when you're teaching class, right, we're going to give, Black exposure. So then we're going to talk about, Black people. And the whole year, you're going to talk about this is their like rap culture. They were in the thugs and all that stuff. They had these riots, and they don't give context or anything behind that. Then all the black kids are gonna be like, oh, this is what we do. And even if they're like, oh no, this isn't what we do, it's going to start like over and over, especially young kids. Like if you tell them something over and over and over and over again, they're going to eventually start to grab onto it and believe it. So my thing is, you just have to be really careful about not just the content, but also the delivery. That's what I'd say.
Rita?
So the school to prison pipeline is something I've done extensive research on, because the first time I heard that term, it really shocked me, right? We educate kids so they have good backgrounds and can do good things in life, and then you're putting the word prison next to it. There's obviously something broken in the system if that's even a thing. So when I gave it some more thought and did some research, when it comes to what teachers can do, something I know that occurs in our schools is when somebody gets into a fight, there's obviously a reason for that kid being in a fight besides just, I felt like punching a kid. So are you going to call an administrator or are you going to call an SRO? What happens when you call an SRO is if that kid accidentally swings at an officer, if the officer doesn't like what that kid does, whether it has to do with the officer themselves or the other student involved in the altercation, that kid can get arrested. And now the school system has no power over if that kid's going to get arrested or not. If you call an administrator, the student can be dealt with using the student code of conduct that's implemented by the school system, which our equity team has a huge part in creating to try and eliminate this discriminatory things that occur in our disciplinary system. And it's just something so simple that as a teacher you can do that you're possibly saving a kid from going to jail. And just some facts I pulled up from previous research. Most people in prison that have had most people who are in prison have had an interrupted education, which means that they've either been suspended or, cited, or something has happened with the legal system. And that's just something as a teacher you can do, which I think would help a lot.
Thank you, Rita. Maya?
Going off of what Issa and Rita both said, I think switching the narrative is really, really important. I know that even though we need to teach other parts of Black history, slavery was a big part of the U.S.'s history. But the way that it's taught, we're immediately taught that Black people were slaves and white people were masters. We're automatically taught that there's a social class difference between those people, that some people have privilege and that others don't. Instead, we could use words like enslaved, like not derogatory terms and making people feel like they're less already in their history classes and stuff like that. And like Rita was saying, how people with interrupted educations tend to be more in prison and stuff like that. I think teachers should be there during like free periods. Like we have an Eagle Hour at my school, and teachers should be like role models and should be open to discussions like this instead of like hard discussions, instead of being like, oh, I have to report you to the counselor or something like that, to make them feel more isolated and make them feel like they're more troubled and stuff like that. That could end up with them in prison or something like that.
Thank you. Anyone else? Camille?
I would also implore the administrators and the people that are hiring to really look at who you're hiring, because I know for me personally, I didn't have my first Black teacher until I was in 8th grade, and she was my Spanish teacher. So I know for many of other people of color that you don't get your first African American history teacher, you don't get your first teacher that is of color until you're reaching your high school level. I know seniors who haven't gotten their first African American history teacher or teacher of color until they've gotten into college. So I just say, look at who you're hiring and look at, because if all we're seeing in front of us is teachers that don't look like us and aren't having the same opinions as us and don't reflect who we want to be as people, then we're going to think that that's not something that we can be. So I just say, look at who you're hiring, because, we need role models that look like us as much as we need role models that don't.
Thank you, Camille. Those are very valid points. And while we're on the topic of education, our next online question actually is, a student writes, the majority of advisory classes get taught the same material over and over again. All the material is repeated each year and it never addresses the real issues with the school. How would you change that? Any panelists? Brenton?
So as the CRASC representative on the mental health task force, I made a recommendation to the board on the issue of making a uniform advisory period for middle and high schools, because what we're seeing is, like many other panelists have alluded to, the delivery of certain lessons and the sort of closed-mindedness of some of the advisory lessons compared to, say, what happened over the weekend can affect a student's view throughout the rest of that day. And another thing I recommended is start doing the advisory lessons in the morning when the students walk through the door, because the instruction that teachers are given to students is not being fully absorbed and taken in, because that student's mind is clouded by the events of the weekend. Or a black man was just shot last night and you don't even address it, and now I've fallen into a pit of depression because you have yet to address my mental needs. So that's what I would say to that question.
Thank you, Brenton. And just to the viewers at home that don't go to school, an advisory period is homeroom at the beginning of the day. Connor?
Something that we need to do to kind of make sure that our advisory lessons are not the same overused lessons that we see every year is to kind of have an advisory council with the administrators or teachers that has that are in charge of making these advisory lessons. I know at my school, and I know a lot of other schools, they have principal advisory councils that has been very useful. Additionally, we have our superintendent team advisory council that is amazing. Using these advisory councils, kind of using that setup to kind of influence what we're getting in advisory, I can seem to be very, very useful and impactful within our advisory lessons coming up.
Sophia?
Can you repeat the question one more time?
Yes. A student writes, the majority of advisory classes get taught the same material over and over again. All of the material is repeated each year and it never addresses the real issues with the school. How would you change that?
I personally, obviously letting the students speak is one big thing. I feel like these lessons are drowning out the student voices by bringing up the points that the adults are seeing, because the perspectives of students and adults are completely different, and they need to be addressed at a teacher who is in like a position, let's say an issue happens at a school, the racial issue happens at a school, the teacher is only going to see what other teachers saw, but they're not going to see what the students saw. So making sure to not drown out the student voices and not letting kids be scared to tell people what they saw. So telling people that, oh, like I would rather be told to ask like people, for teachers to tell us when like an incident happens, to be like, let us know what happened, like have an anonymous way to tell, rather than teachers being like, oh, you can tell us and we're not going to punish you or something like that. Because I feel like if you're saying that you're not going to punish us, that makes me more scared that I will be in case. Not that I've ever been through a situation like that yet, but that's one big thing I would say is not drowning out the student voice.
Camille?
So I don't know if I'm alone in this. I go to North County. I think I'm the only North County student up here, but we don't use advisory at all. So advisory for me is after first period. It's a free period where we sit with our the people we've been in advisory with since freshman year, and we all sit and we can talk, and sometimes teachers will come in, and if we have a lesson for advisory, the lesson is always something along the lines of, pep rally this week is going to be class color day on Friday. And I've never had an advisory lesson where they've said, hey, this is what's going on, not even what's going on in America, but what's going on in your school. Like I've never had a lesson where they've actually addressed things. It's always been, this is what pep rally is going to be this week, or at the beginning of the school year, it's, these are the student code of conduct rules, please make sure you follow them. I've never had an advisory session where I've actually talked about things and have done anything of substance. I just wanted to provide that point of view.
That was a very wonderful insight. And you go to North County, so any administration from North County, just write that down. Maya?
I just want to say, I completely agree with the fact that we should use advisory and homeroom
or at my school, we call it Roundup and Starting Gate, to contribute and talk about the things that are happening in the outside world about like the Black Lives Matter movement and things like that. Because I especially know that even though I'm only going into the 8th grade, we do the same sort of things in homeroom, and advisory that we do every single year. And I know a lot of my friends, including myself, sometimes dread going to advisory for the fact that we know exactly what we're going to have to do. So I think if we switched it up, or at least asked a couple students, like get a group of students together from each grade and ask them, what would be some good ideas to incorporate this thing into advisory, or this thing into homeroom. And I also think that at my school, at least, we have something called blackout period, which basically the first 10 minutes and the last 10 minutes of class, you're not allowed to leave. So you use that last 10 minutes for like openings and closures, and then you can leave to go like bathroom and nurse like that, unless it's like an emergency. And I know for my homeroom and advisory, it's only 25 minutes long. So I think you use that time wisely and speak on the more important facts that you have, that you need to talk about, and make sure everybody like knows. Because I know a lot of my friends don't have phones, don't have social media, they don't know what's going on. Like a lot of my friends, they get on these Zoom, like our Google Meets and things like that, and they have no idea what's going on because they don't have social media, or they don't have TikTok and Snapchat and Instagram and Twitter and things like that. So I think if we talked about it in school, especially during like homeroom and advisory, instead of doing the same assignments over and over and over again that students dread, and we switched it up a little bit and talked about something that would intrigue the students, students would be, one, a lot more interested in finding a solution and working towards a solution, but also just more into it and into the conversation that we have in school. Because I would much rather see all my friends enjoying the conversation and enjoying the activities that we're doing than sitting on their phones, sneaking their phones in the back of the class, bored, because we do the same thing every week. Like we have community circles, we sometimes we go outside, sometimes we do all this type of stuff, but I've never seen in any of my classes where we talk about like, we have a community circle about how we feel about the Black Lives Matter movement or what's going on in our community. I've never had like, we go outside and we sit and we talk in a circle and just talk about how we feel. Or in our classroom, we do little assignments. Like they love to touch on the fact of like bullying and things like that, but they don't touch on the fact that most of the bullying comes from you're bullying, you don't know it, or you're saying derogatory things and you don't know it. Like if they really dig down deep into the topic and not just kind of float above the surface, that I think it would benefit a lot more. Because a lot of students, as soon as like you get picked on or something like that, you automatically think of it as bullying, or you automatically think of, or so as soon as somebody says, a kind of racist, not really racist, but biased comment, you automatically think of it as bullying. But instead you should think of it as you need to talk to somebody about it and let somebody know so they can nip it in the bud quickly before it becomes bullying.
Thank you, Maya. We have time for one more panelist. I saw Sumaya's hand first.
I just wanted to bring the perspective of like someone who's been involved in like expectation filled advisory lesson. My teacher, Miss Patel at Arundel High School, she's like one of the best teachers, and she a lot of times created some of the advisory lessons. So like that classroom was such like a safe space, and having a teacher of color, it really helped out because everybody felt safe and felt like we could express ourselves without being like judged, and our teacher knew what we was talking about and understood us. And we would stand in a community circle and always like do the lessons full out. Even to one point, like I wanted to bring up something that I saw and I witnessed and a lot of other students witnessed in our class, which was the policing of, we already know that students get policed a lot, but seeing a teacher getting policed, especially like one of our favorite teachers, policed by an admin for So she made one of the lessons, and we were the first ones to try it out. So the administrator didn't believe her when she said, "Oh, we already did it, and we were the ones who made it." So we're finishing up a community circle. So she was kind of police right then, because the administrator was like, "Oh, I'm gonna tell the principal, just to make sure, like check it with the principal." So policing is a huge problem, and as well as the low number of teachers of color and ones who are like genuine and not just trying to maintain their spot, but they would do anything to keep their job, even if it means making students of color uncomfortable.
Thank you, Samaya. And now let's move on to another online question. How do you all feel about police officers in your schools? So they're referring to SROs. Beckett?
So I personally believe that having SROs the SROs specifically are very different than your average police officer. I know that I've heard that the process for choosing SROs, they choose the very best of the best. But SROs are the ones who have the connections with the students. They're not there to deal with one little argument in a classroom. They are there for when things get actually dangerous, but also to build a connection with these students. Personally at Meade, I know so many kids who are just friends with these police officers, and it builds a level of trust that students might normally not have with other law enforcement officers. So having the process is very specific, which I think is great, and I think it's important to have them there just to have these conversations, and have students have someone that they trust and they can reach out to.
Sophia?
Though what I agree with what Becca was saying, I think some students do feel threatened by the SROs, obviously, because they look like officers most of the time. They're wearing the uniform. And it just makes school feel, though I understand why they're there, they are also, I feel like, are very threatening to some people, especially to black people, obviously, because that's who mostly gets faced with the issues that are coming from the cops directly. I understand the importance of them, but I feel like sometimes they may be too aggressive. And yes, people can build relationships with them. Our SRO at our school, I know his name is Paul or something. I just feel like it's a threatening to some people, but to other people it's very helpful. So
Samaya?
Personally, we have multiple SROs at my school, but this year and last year I built a personal connection with SRO at our school currently, Mr. Rainer, as well as Miss Ashley. So I feel like it's important that they get more people, SROs, ones that can relate to the students and ones that will build a community. Because if we think about it, a lot of people's argument is that police are there to protect and service and stuff like that. So ones that will take that perspective and try and play the actual part of a cop and be a community person rather than the aggressor or the punisher. That's why I feel like that it's important to have that one. It's just different because even the black one we had at the school, he wasn't the best or a people person, So it's just the evaluation, is really, they're cool to me.
Thank you. Demaya?
I know the SROs, honestly, in my opinion, I like them. The SRO at my school, he is an African-American male, Officer Webke, and he is there to protect us, like you say, but most of the kids honestly have a better connection with him than they do with the administrator and the principal. So he's very nice, and even though, yes, most officers I do feel like, oh, if I do something wrong, something in the slightest bit way, I may get in trouble. But with him, I feel comfortable. I feel protected that I know that he will protect our school and protect the kids that are in it.
Brenton, you had your hand up.
Like I said before, I get apprehensive whenever I see a police officer, period. So I tend to feel the need to look over my shoulder or watch the police officer's hand every time I walk past, or just because of that experience and that trauma I felt when I read those news headlines. So while I agree that SROs are there to protect and serve, and some of them are very good. We have some very good police officers in Anne Arundel County. We still have to realize that there's a lot of damage to be repaired when it comes to the relationship between police officers and people of color.
Thank you, Brenton. Insightful. Edward?
I'm glad that all the SROs in all the respective schools have been, you know, people that you could really come to and really build connections with, and that's great. Especially as what Brenton said, we do need to repair the already shattered relationship between the public and the police. But the issue that I find is, why do we have, like in some schools, there are more attention, like we have more police officers than we have guidance counselors. And I feel like that shouldn't be the case. Like we need more guidance counselors, more qualified people that are here for you, that are open for you, that if you have any, you know, anything you want to talk about, like they are the people to go to. And I'm not saying that SROs aren't friendly people, aren't nice people, but we need more of people who are trained to do these things, trained to understand the feelings and unify the student body. And that is an issue that I see that we need to change.
Maya?
I completely agree. Like, I agree with both sides, obviously, because I can see where everybody's coming from. Personally, my SRO at my school is Officer Slater. He's Caucasian, but he is a very welcoming person. He listens to everybody's story. Like if I'm having a bad day, he sits at the same spot every single class period. I know where he is. I know where I can contact him. I know where his office is. Like he's always been there for me. He's kind of like that big brother figure that I've always wanted, you know. And I don't know how it is at everybody else's school in the county, but I know that in my school, you know, sometimes he does have to step in and do his job and do what he needs to do, but he doesn't, it's not like like every single chance he gets, you know, he's right on it. Every single time somebody gets in an argument, every single time there's like an altercation, you know, he's right there. He's ready to arrest somebody. Like it's never like that. He's there. He listens to both sides of the story. If he does need to get in, then he gets in. He's always at school in the morning. Like he knows a lot of the students that he talks to and works with. He knows their birthdays. Like I got a birthday, like a happy birthday from him. Like he's there. Like if you're having a bad day, he's always the first one to ask you if you're okay. If you know, you ask him, hey, can you pull me out of this class for a second to talk to me? He'll be there. But it's not like he's just there for certain students. He's there for everybody. If anybody comes up to him, it could be an admin, it could be a student, it could be just a visitor at the school. If you need help or you need somebody to talk to, he's always there. So, you know, I think having SROs are an awesome opportunity, but I also agree with what Edward said, that the fact that some schools have more SROs than guidance counselors is insane, for the fact that if you can afford, if these teachers have to get their masters, their like all these degrees to become a teacher, and these police officers have to go through police academy and go through all this criteria to get to where they are, I think it would be a lot. Look, for me, I'm blessed to have, we're blessed to have 3 different counselors for each grade, but I know a lot of schools don't get that. A lot of schools have 1 counselor for the whole school, and 1, that's a lot of burden on the counselors, and 2, it makes kids feel less welcome. Like, you know, she has a lot of stuff on her plate. Let's not go bug her. I just keep it to myself, or I go tell a friend. And we don't want that to be the case. We want it to be that, you know, if you want to talk about how you feel about the Black Lives Matter movement or the killing of George Floyd, or the killing of any African American, you have a person to go to. And if that is an SRO, if that is a teacher, if it is a guidance counselor, you just need somebody there. And a lot of schools, I know schools that don't even have SROs and just have one guidance counselor. But I think it's just really important to have that one person that you can always go to and talk to. And I know a lot of schools don't have that, but I think having SROs, that's another person to talk to. That's another person to add to the guidance counselor team, or just a person to talk to. Because at the end of the day, if you're having a bad day, you want to talk to somebody, I think the school would much rather you talk to somebody there than to keep it to yourself or go to social media about it and bash somebody else about it. I think that they would much rather you come to somebody in school or go to a parent and have a parent contact the school. But they just want you to talk so you're not feeling alone or feeling like, you know, you have to go through this yourself, because obviously you don't. There's a lot of people that feel like that. I think having that one person, you know, that you can turn to and talk to is really important.
Thank you, Maya. That was great. And our next question is an old male 11th grader writes, "We all know the truth about certain high schools in our community. We all see the things that teachers and administrators don't see. How can we address those things without people getting hurt? Racism is a topic most high schoolers don't even want to say in fear of what other peers will do or say. How can we address those who are taking part in discriminatory actions without them retaliating? Could you ever guarantee the safety of the students on both sides of this issue?" And our first panelist is Jaina.
Okay, I'm like have it on my phone so I'm gonna like look. But at the end it says like, how do we take part in this, take action without people who are making these discriminatory comments retaliating. And I'm just gonna be like, just be honest, just be straight up, just say what the problem is and educate. A lot of things that's happening in my school, it's like, oh well, I don't want to make people uncomfortable. And my thing is make people uncomfortable, make people as uncomfortable as I'm feeling as uncomfortable in like the current like climate and what type of society that we live in. Make people feel uncomfortable, because that's where you get real results. So I don't care about white fragility or white comfort, just talk about it, because it's going to make someone uncomfortable, because then it's like, oh well, it seems like you're bashing my race kind of. But to like, no, we're just sharing what like actually is happening. And we should the people who are like telling them like about like what's happening should be like expert, or most likely minorities expert teachers that know what they're talking about, have had this experience, researched it, so we can get like the most like correct information out there. Just be straight up about it. Tell the truth. A lot of the American public school system usually likes to like sugarcoat and like downplay what's really happening currently, or like our history, and that doesn't do good for anyone, because then people go out of high school into the real world and see that, oh, life is not all like, you know, sugar and candy. It's not all like toned down. It's loud and it's angry and it's furious. And when you go out there, people hate who you are just because of your skin color, just because of your ethnicity, just because of your gender, sex, whatever. So we shouldn't downplay it. And if they choose to retaliate, that's of course not good. But most times in the current society that we live in, we have the resources. A lot of people have the resources to know what's going on. Even if they don't have the technology like computers and laptops and phones to know what's going on, they can tell from walking outside what's going on. We have those resources. We can use them. If you don't use those resources, you are refusing to accept what's happening currently. And we should just be honest, straight up about it. They choose to retaliate. That's what they do. And we figure out a way to fix that. And, you know, we don't sugarcoat things. Yeah.
Thank you, Jenny. You brought up a very good point. You know, it's okay to be uncomfortable, because a lot of times it's uncomfortable being Black in America. Next, Issa.
Okay, so this question, when I first saw it, especially stuck out to me, because I would definitely be giving this question a lot of thought in my own time. So first off, what we have to recognize is that almost like what Jaina was saying, some people are going to get uncomfortable discussing racism as an issue. Some people are going to be scared or shy because they don't want to share what they have to say. Some people are going to be more like attacking and pointing fingers at each other and stuff. And some other people might be more defensive because they feel like, oh, you're talking about me. And then they'll like get backed into, they'll feel like they're backed into a corner, and then they'll like, not feel as a part of the discussion anymore. And that's what I'm saying with touchy issues comes touchy emotions, but that doesn't mean that we have to avoid the whole issue altogether. Racism is very real in our society, very real in the world in general, cultures around the world. Racism is really real. And as the generation that's coming up with these issues, I mean, like us, nobody says that we're necessarily entitled to inherit the problems of the people before us. So my thing is, yes, it is here now, but if we want to solve the problem, that means we have to give it exposure. So we familiarize ourselves with it, we take it head on. And because so many other people before us, I feel like some people already said this point, but being silent is also a form of almost joining against what is happening. So that's kind of the choice we need to make. So the other part of the question, in order for discussions to say healthy and progressive and not devolve into like sided arguments and attacks, I'd say my two main points are empathy and space. That's my two main things. So for one, speaking in echo chambers, really, like when you go and talk to people who already agree with exactly what you're saying, that doesn't really help anybody, in my opinion. Because people who already agree with you, you're not sharing anything new, or you're not furthering a cause or gaining more like support or anything else like that. So in order to really expand the feelings and really get everyone involved in the conversation, you have to reach out of your comfort zone and go and talk to other people who who may not agree with what you have to say, or agree with you but have a different approach to the same exact issue. And what my thing is, when you go and meet those people, you have to meet them where they are and listen to understand. That's my thing. When I say meet people where they are, what I mean is don't expect them to instantly understand, and especially instantly internalize whatever you're saying, because you're talking to a human being and they have their own set of life experiences, and you can't force that upon them suddenly and expect them to take it. Because a conversation is going to take time, it's going to take patience, so relax. And my thing is, when you listen to people, that doesn't mean that you're just sitting there and like hearing their words. A lot of the time, you don't want to listen in order to retaliate or refute somebody or poke holes in their arguments or whatever. So you're not like listening to pick them apart. You're actually listening with the intention to get what they're trying to tell you, and really just to understand them as a human being. And so one of my big roots of evil, almost like Drake was saying earlier, ignorance. Another one I would say is arrogance. So don't feel so prideful going into a discussion that you feel like your values are above whatever they have to say, and you start just going at them with whatever you have. Because really, if you start talking to people like that, people are going to either back away and just be like, forget it, and they'll go hands off like they were before, or they're going to become defensive and you have a whole nother problem. Because no one really wants someone harsh, shoving their ideas down their throat. So also something, I know I'm kind of going on, but I really was thinking about this. But something I'd like to talk about a little bit is what I call opportunistic hunting. And I think we really have to get rid of that. So what I mean is that we realize now we're in a complex situation. A lot of people are navigating these times. People who might be sort of new to this situation are trying to explore different viewpoints and really make up what they think is right. So when people say or do something that may seem insensitive out of like true ignorance or whatever, and they might apologize or whatever, they're trying to explore and understand. That doesn't mean that we come out the gate to try and shut them down and everyone is like all over their case about it. Because then that, like I was saying earlier, that creates a different type of problem. But the biggest thing, like I was saying, in order that kind of ties everything together for me is empathy. Seriously, put yourself in other people's mindset. I didn't say shoes because we have to look deeper than what people's actions are, what these people are saying, and things like that. The complete picture of somebody's life. And I'm not slighting any of the experiences of any minority group in this country. I'm just saying that we have to reach both ways in order for things to work and really solve the problem. And like I was saying, the issue is raw and sensitive, but that doesn't mean we back away from it. That means that we learn about how to tackle it and limit its effects. And also something so important, I feel like might summarize everything I just said, is we're attacking the principle, not the people. That's my thing. So, yeah.
Wow, Issa. It's hard to believe, you're not in college yet, because I was very, very thoughtful. I'm just blown away. Next, Sophia.
I personally feel like when it comes to, like the question was asking, how do you see and how can you address these things without people getting hurt? First of all, I feel like education, I feel like it's a step, honestly, steps you have to take. First step would be educating the student, calling them out, telling them why you called them out and why what they said or what they did was not okay. Obviously, most high schoolers are scared to talk about racism, mainly because they want to stay neutral. They don't want to be on either side, either because they have friends who disagree with the topic or they have friends who are with the topic, whatever. I personally am a person who believes that people aren't scared to not be racist anymore. So I feel like we need racist. One theory, like big believer of, is that showing that if you are racist or if you have done a racist act that is directly targeting a group of a racial group, then you should be called out for your actions. You should be put on blast in a sense of what you said. Obviously, taking into mind of things like that, but they have to understand that what they did was on themselves and that it was not okay for them to do what they did. Obviously, safety is obviously there's a safety issue with that. Keeping it safe. Obviously, if someone does something wrong, I feel that if they have truly have apologized for what their actions were, and they have truly changed and they truly have shown that they've educated themselves, then they should come to a mutual understanding of what they did. Then a student should be forgiven for an action, unless obviously there's just too many things you have to weigh in thinking about this topic too. So yeah.
Thank you, Sophia. John.
Yeah, of course. This is a loaded question, so I'm gonna take this in pieces. The first part of this was how can we address those things? How can we address these things without people getting hurt? I think it's all about opening up the dialogue. And I remember back in 2017, 2018, and correct me, the years are probably wrong, but 2 years ago, there was a huge thing in liberal colleges how they would open up these safe spaces, and so many people there's so much confliction because people liked it because it was like, oh yeah, people are sensitive, they get to reflect about what they think, but then also it destroys that dialogue, and so people can't talk about these issues, and people don't want to feel uncomfortable, but they kind of need to be able to bring up solutions, and these are how solutions are made. The next part was racism is a topic most high schoolers don't even want to say, and fear of what other peers will do or say. How can we address those who are taking part in discriminatory actions without them retaliating? I think it's actually encouraging them to actually say something, even if it's the unpopular opinion, because then we get them to learn, or they can understand the other side of the argument. We get in this thing today in the political and even the business field where people are too much on one side of the issue, even if it's just more than two sides. Me, myself, being a fence sitter, I'm always a fence sitter in every situation, but you gotta learn and kind of get to understand the other side of the fence, understand where they're coming from, and even their background of what they're saying. Their stories that back up what they're saying. And the very last thing, which is a really big one, could you ever guarantee the safety of the students on both sides? And I feel like if we took away the foundation and fix it up and put in a new one, I imagine we can. Coming from whenever you bring up this dialogue, we have to make sure we put up expectations and rules so people can understand, hey, we need to listen to understand. We need to be able to respect the other person and, talk about the principle, not the person on the other side of the argument. Yeah.
Thank you, John. A sophomore from Southern High School asks, what are ways you believe students can help foster changes in our society? The first panelist is Amaya.
I think that this kind of piggybacks off of the last question. Going to a school that was predominantly white, there have been a lot of racial incidents. Like in the past years, there's always been a threat to shoot up all the N-words and like a bunch of other stuff like that. And in my school, there's been people who have, like they say, call them out or like put them on blast, but tell them what they've done wrong and continue to educate themselves and others, like come with the facts of why this is wrong, come with their experiences to help make a change in those people. And even if they don't make a change in those people, the people around them get empowered to speak up. Like, I know I wouldn't be here, like, speaking up if it wasn't for my friends speaking up against racial incidents and stuff like that. And even if you're wrong, I think it's really important to know that you can learn from that and that you should always be progressive as students. Another way we can speak up, if you can or are able, you can go to protests. I know there's a recent protest in Tickneck that I attended, and they said at the protest that back in like 1994, there was a KKK rally in that exact same place. So knowing now how far we've come and how much of an impact we made, because seeing ourselves on the news and stuff like that, every student there, every person there made a difference. And that puts us in positions to make change in the future. Like if we pursue clubs, pursue protests, pursue things like that, then we can get jobs or go to colleges to further educate ourselves on things like that and make hopefully legal changes or bigger changes. And even our clubs today, like at my school, my National Honor Society is discussing doing something for the Black Lives Matter movement, like donating to protesters, stuff like that. So there are a lot of ways that you can make a difference as a student, signing petitions, emailing, stuff like that. I know recently I sent an email to our county executive about the student body cameras. Drake's nodding because he knows about that, yeah. And it actually got it put back into the budget because of all the students who really cared about it. So we can make differences right now if we continue to speak up and educate and ally yourselves.
Thank you, Amaya, for that. I was nodding my head because the NAACP kind of spearheaded the effort to get students to send the email. So just a great job to everyone that did send an email. Our next panelist is Edward.
Contrary to popular belief, like, you think you're a student and you're a kid, like you can't possibly make any change at all. But as Drake Smith has done, with the NAACP, like the power of the youth is awfully been very, how do I say it, like undermined, overlooked. But we have power. We can actually make a change in our community. And so if you want to think of, just to answer the any instances of racism you may experience in school, speak up, take leadership positions, start clubs, start like what Connor said, a student advisory group that brainstorms ideas of how to educate our student body. There's so many things you could do, whether it be in your soccer club, if you happen to be the only person of color in the club, speak up, talk to them, because I believe that racism could be ended if two sides just sat down and talked, an open discussion that has to be uncomfortable for both sides in order for true progress to be made. And once that conversation doesn't happen, then nothing could really happen. And that's why it's up to us, the youth, to really start this, to really get the gears in turning, because we are the future generation of American leaders, teachers, like police officers. That is us. And we need to understand the power that we hold and how we can properly utilize this power in our everyday community.
Thank you, Edward. Always get involved. Becky.
Yeah, I agree with everything that Edward has said, because students, we really are, everyone says it, but we are the future. And in order to change the future, we have to take steps now, because we are stuck in a repeating society where we are just okay with dealing with these issues that have been here for hundreds of years, and we're slowly fixing them. But if we are standing with that, then we can't make progress. And so now we're making so much change, and all the people in this generation are basically saying, if you can't move on with the future, you're going to get left in the past. And so I think definitely some steps students can take is what we've said before. Like, you have to listen to others, you have to educate yourself, and you can't be afraid to change your opinion when you learn more. Like, after you educate yourself more, you're allowed to change your opinion, and you're allowed to say, I learned more, I can change my opinion, I can do better next, I can do better in the future. And I heard this quote earlier today, and I really stuck by it. And people have said it kind of in here, but instead of calling people out, call people in and have a discussion. So what we said before, like, you have to listen with the intent of understanding and attack the principle, not the person. Because if you just attack a person based on their beliefs, then we can't change and we can't be better. We're just gonna all have a argument there and forth. But if you attack the principle and help people learn and educate themselves better, then we can move forward together. And also, I think Connor's gonna definitely mention this some, but students can get involved in so many different ways, such as CRASC, because I've been in CRASC for like maybe 4 years now, and I've just learned so much more about the county and the people around me, and learned how to make a change in my community. And it gives you such a platform and such a voice to be able to make these changes, no matter how small they may be.
Thank you, Beckett. Connor?
Yeah, so before I start talking a little bit like of CRASC, like Beckett said, I kind of want to talk about clubs, because sometimes not everyone has the ability to kind of come out to our CRASC meetings. So there's a club called the Urban Book Club, ran by Miss Thompson at Old Mill High School. I think I saw her in the chat. Shout out to Miss Thompson. That kind of promotes minority authors and kind of has those stories. Additionally, I'm a part of the Human Rights Club over at Old Mill High School, so that we kind of spread the importance of that. And this is definitely an issue that we can talk about and kind of spread out through the importance. Additionally, for CRASC, I serve as the president. And if you don't know what CRASC stands for, it's the Chesapeake Regional Association Student Councils, the official voice of Anne Arundel County Public School students. I've been with this group for about 5 years now, and I have had the time of my life learning how to create change and work with people who actually have an impact on community decisions. We even have a lobbying day. It's something that we kind of didn't do for a couple of years because of the transition of advisors, but we usually have it. We were supposed to have it this year, but unfortunately, coronavirus canceled that, but we were planning to have one next year, so watch out for that. But additionally, I kind of want to encourage every student to join us. We want your voice to be heard. This wonderful panel is just 13 students, but we are a system of 84,000 amazing students. So we need as many of you as possible to come join us to create a better system for all students. Please feel free to reach out to us or any member of CRASC that you may know about any questions.
Thank you, Connor, for that, because a note about CRASC, I wasn't a member of CRASC before I became student member of the Board of Education. So don't think that you have to be a member for 5 years, 4 years, or like 3 years to make a change. You can join this year if you're a senior. You can join if you're a junior, and you can make a lot of change. And if you're a junior or maybe even a sophomore, maybe you can be, where I'm going to be at in a few months. You can be the next student member of the Board of Education. You can do that to a multitude of organizations like CRASC, the NAACP, and everything else. So.
Yes, yeah. That is definitely it. I just want to put this one point out there real quick. CRASC is open for any 6th to 12th graders in AACPS school system. So even if you're a rising 5th grader right now, you are more welcome to come to our meetings in August. Thank you, Drake.
I know we have a lot of people with hands up, but Rita, she wanted to go, and then we'll see where the time is at from there.
Yeah, so I just wanted to kind of take it back to the question. Thank you so much, Connor, for mentioning that. I know my journey with CRASC and SMOP has been really impactful. But I just want to recognize that being a person of color can feel like a burden sometimes. We're asking you to talk and speak up about these experiences and correct people. And just like I mentioned in my opening statement, like it's scary to tell someone to stop because you don't know what they're going to do to you. And I just want to call that out and recognize that that is the case. And we know that it happens. And we're asking you to reach into these really deep issues that have really developed who you are. And that's hard for anybody to do that kind of self-reflection. But to know that they're difficult and there's other people out there that are having those experiences is just something I wanted to add. And then on top of that, I know sometimes it's discouraging when you are being, you feel like the government around you or whoever's in charge doesn't look like you. You don't want to be a part of it. You want to do your own thing and work from the outside. But I've always taken the step of kind of changing things from the inside. So I saw my class council wasn't diverse, so I ran for student president. And then the next 4 years later, I saw that my SJ officer elections were reflected now of the students who were in my school. So it's just simple things like that. It's scary to walk into a room full of white people and feel like you can do anything, but just take that step, have faith in yourself, know that you're being courageous, and you could even end up as a student board member. I've had a wonderful experience of being, and I look forward to seeing what Drake will do with it. So those are my 2 cents on that.
Thank you, Rita. And with this last question, just a quick programming note. We will be going till 8:15 now, just to make sure we get all the questions in. So the last question, a student responded question is, sorry, it's right here. Is social media a cure, a curse, or both? And the first panelist is Beckett.
Okay, I'm just gonna answer Camille's question real quick. She said, how can you join CRASC? So I'll just touch on that really quickly though. Every student in a CPS for 6th to 12th grade is already a member of CRASC technically. And you can be a part of your school's delegation to come to CRASC events. And we also have a website and social medias that you can get on to be more involved. And we have elections coming up soon. So it's very, very easy to get involved with that. But social media, I think it's both a curse and a cure, because it gives you, we are the generation who's grown up on social media. So we don't really know what the world is like without it, but we have access to resources and education like we've never had it before. And so literally just a quick Instagram search, you can find 10 things to post or 10 things to educate yourself. But at the same time, it also is a really easy way to spread false information or hate. And many people are just using social media for the trends, or just posting about this for the trends, to seem like they're doing the right thing instead of actually wanting a change. So I think that it's a very important thing to be an activist and to use. Everyone has a platform, whether you have 10 followers or 10,000 followers. So to use that platform for good, but it's also still important to make sure you're doing it for the right reasons, not just to seem like you're trying to follow a trend and posting a black screen,
Thank you, Beckett. Great advice. Maya?
Sorry. I completely agree with Beckett that social media is definitely both, because I've seen a lot of great things come out of social media, and I've seen a lot of people use social media a lot to express themselves and as an escape from their reality, to talk to different friends that they've met all around the world, and just be happy and feel as if, even though they're not right next to me, I still have somebody that I can reach out and talk to. But then at the same time, in 0.5 seconds, somebody that was just your friend can go and talk behind your back on social media and post something about you and mess the whole thing up. And then a rumor starts that's not true. Or, for instance, like Beckett said, sending false information or saying that you're about something when you're really not, or you're just following the leader. necessarily, which following leader is not a bad thing, but if you don't know what you're following, then it can be. So I think even though, yes, we do have a lot of ways to educate people who, I know, like, I have friends that just now started using social media or still don't know how to use social media because their parents just want to keep them in that comfort zone of, like, I control everything you do, which is completely fine. But when it does come that time, I want people to know, like, social media doesn't always, you don't have to always think of social media as, some place where everybody hates on each other and spreads false things. Like, I know a lot of people, the recent Pride Fall thing that has been going around with the LGBT, the Pride Month thing. I know a lot of people disable their accounts, block certain people, or just don't use social media anymore. And I think that's completely wrong, that you have to make somebody else feel so uncomfortable just by texting them and saying certain things. Or you're making somebody feel as though they can't be themselves over social media, or they can't be happy, or they can't express the way they feel, or their sexuality, because in your eyes it's wrong or it's disgusting, which it's not, it's your opinion. So I think that is one of the downfalls, but there's also, most of the Black Lives Matters movement it's spread because of social media, because we're in the time of COVID-19. A lot of parents don't let their children go outside or go to these protests because there's so many people, and also it's very dangerous. And I completely understand, but that doesn't mean that your voice can't be heard. You just have to, like, social media, you use social media as a platform, like Beckett said. You can have 10 followers or 10,000, like she said, and still get your point across. As long as you're not falsifying information, that you know what you're talking about, and you're not following behind somebody else. Because just because somebody else is saying something doesn't mean that it's necessarily correct or right. But don't use it as a way, but it can also be flipped very easily to turn somebody down or bash somebody down for saying the wrong thing. And I think that's wrong, because it's their opinion at the end of the day. And instead of bashing them, educate them and let them know that, okay, you may believe this, but here are some other facts. So it's not, people aren't seeing it as, such a negative thing, because social media is not created to be negative. It was created to be positive, to help people get their point across and express themselves and just be happy. So I think that I don't want people to think that it's a curse or necessarily something that's bad. I want people to think of it as, a platform to express yourself, even if you don't have that many followers, even if it's just like your best friend or your bro just following you. Just, you need to know that you have, like, a place to go and to be happy.
Thank you, Mai, because throughout that, you touched on something that we really haven't touched on during this discussion. The lives of, gay, Black people, part of the LGBTQ plus community. All Black lives matter, not just straight Black lives, gay Black lives, and trans Black lives. They all matter. So thank you, Mai, for bringing that up. Next panelist is Camille.
So I agree with everything that people have said before me. I think that social media is definitely a mix between a cure and a curse, because, we get to learn people's names such as George Floyd, Tamir Rice, Breonna Taylor, and Trayvon Martin, but we're getting a lot of negative information. We're getting a lot of spread of false information. Additionally, on the side of cure, a lot of the information that the news is putting out right now is painting the protesters as thugs and as rioters and as unpeaceful. But if you really look at it, I know I use Twitter frequently. A lot of the videos that are coming out from social media platforms are showing protesters in a positive light, which isn't being displayed by the media. So I think it can be, like everyone else has said before me, it can be turned into something extremely negative, and it can be used to bash people. And the use of cancel culture is so prevalent on TikTok and Twitter and Instagram and everything. I think it's such a prevalent thing, and at the end of the day, it really doesn't do anything. You cancel someone for 10 minutes, and then they're back to their same 1,000 followers. I think trends such as the Black Square really didn't end up doing anything. If anything, it ended up clogging the Black Lives Matter hashtag, so no one got the correct information out there. So I think it's depending on how you use it. If it's used in the correct way, it can be a cure, but if it's used in the incorrect way, it ends up being a curse.
Thank you, Camille. The next panelist is Damaya.
I agree with everything that each panelist has said before me. Social media honestly is both a cure and a curse. It's a great thing, and it can be a great thing when you're using it positively, but it can also be very negative when it's used to spread hate and spread false information. Especially, I know like TikTok has banned the Black Lives Matter hashtag and stuff. So with that, you wonder, well, is it like now trying to not let us use our voice anymore, or is it like what? And now you also have it where it can be a cure, where you have higher ups that are also using their social media platforms as great things like, no, do not let these names die out. Remember the names, say their names, say this. You need to know, you need to be open-minded about all of this. So that's honestly a great way. And honestly, social media can be also used as a great way with helplines and hotlines that can be posted everywhere, spreaded everywhere, instead of knowing that fact that your voice isn't getting heard.
Thank you, Demaya. Samaya?
I would like to bring up a point that it's actually piggybacking off of what Sophia said earlier about calling people out for with their actions. And social media is the tool that sometimes people use and that I have used. And it's kind of like a curse and a blessing, because it's a blessing that you get your message out and that, you know, people can see your perspective and your point of view and just understand, you know, where you're coming from. Because I feel like sometimes, like, we don't need to preserve the feelings, again, like, we don't need to preserve the feelings or fragileness of people that know that they're wrong and ignorant. You know, if somebody does wrong, we're not about to just excuse them and say that they're young or they don't understand. Like, if you do something wrong, take full accountability, you know what I'm saying? So it was like a month or two back, and I posted a video calling out people for using the N-word and not really saying nothing when, you know, when stuff like this happens, when these protests happen. And my voice was, I felt like my voice was taken away from me because the principal told me to take it down, like, immediately, without knowing my side of the story, for trying to call out, you know, people for saying the N-word and, like, using hateful speech. And, like, ultimately they kind of got away with it because it was their say against mine. So, you know, it kind of like how Demaya said, TikTok limits Black creators, you know, speech and their ability to use their freedom of speech, but it will let you know, white creators say hateful things. It's kind of like the real world. Like, it's kind of like Anne Arundel County Public Schools, where they'll be like, well, they'll let white kids say what they need to say, you know, tear down kids of the minority, and then as soon as a person of color jumps back and tries to say something, you know, to stick up for themselves, the teacher will be like, oh, don't do that because it will hurt their feelings, or, you know, it's escalating, or, you know, you're being too loud, when ultimately you're passionate and trying to educate. So it's just controlled. I feel like it's very much controlled and censored, and that's how I feel.
Thank you, Samaya. Issa?
So when I heard this, I was just thinking just now while I was listening to everybody talk, you know, good old is a knife to cook or to kill, is water to drink or drown type question. So what I'm thinking right now kind of is like, let's take this issue beyond social media, right? I was looking at the title of the event, and it's called Let's Talk Justice, right? So I was thinking about, you know, looking at all the different people that we have on this panel. I started to think about the broader type of America that we live in. Any medium that you use, social media, writing, sending the emails or whatever, talking, especially, oh my goodness, the things that you say to people, all those mediums can be both, but it's not its fault, basically. It's doing its job. The whole thing is with the people behind it who are doing whatever they're doing. So I wouldn't necessarily put the question onto that, but I would actually reflect it back onto the people. And since the title of our discussion here is Let's Talk Justice, I want to know, basically, just food for thought. When you're going out and speaking to other people, are you seeking justice or are you seeking retribution? So there's a big difference. Do you want people to understand? Do you want to open up a dialogue? Or do you want people to carry the weight of whatever you're feeling and you just put it out there and put it on them, you know? So really you have to know, before you say anything, what is your target? What's your goal? That's with anything. And how are you going to best get there? Because really, honestly, if we have a national issue, everyone, in my opinion, has a right actually to have a seat at the table in order to discuss it, because it's all of their America. So.
Thank you, Issa. I really like that. It is water to drink or drown, is a knife to cut or kill. And that really just opens your eyes. And with that, we come to the end of the questions, and now it's time for the closing remarks. And I'll be giving my closing remarks, followed by Rita. So what we heard tonight was students speaking truth to power. We heard students say exactly what was on their mind. You may have liked it, you may have disliked it, but you heard it. And what I want from this is that we actually do something. I don't want this just to turn into, we tried, the students, they said what they wanted to say, we heard them, and we just go back to like nothing happened. We heard suggestions, we heard solutions, and let's really implement those. We heard more implicit bias training, Black student unions, just teach the basic thing of respect in the elementary schools. We want more time to we want more real training in the advisory period, homeroom. And we just want the topics to be, I guess, more interesting and about the current situation we are in, because we're all stakeholders in this world, whether we like it or not. And we all really have to do our part to make sure we're always moving forward. And now this tonight, this is just a start to that. This is literally a start. We're trying to make this a series. So if you weren't on the panel, you were in the comments, and we had a lot of students ask, how can I be on the panel? I want to be on the panel. I have a lot of input. Well, at the end, we will tell you how to get involved, because this is just one of many great things that will really lead to change. We talked about how can I get involved? Well, as simple as just speaking up. Don't be afraid to use your voice, because that's the one thing they really can't take away from you, your voice. And when you see something that's wrong, you see something that's not right, just use it. Thank you. Rita?
Thank you. Very well said, Drake. Before I go to my official remarks, I just wanted to say I'm so proud of everybody on this panel. You guys talked about some really difficult things, and it warms my heart to know that you have that kind of bravery. And it's extremely encouraging for me as someone who's still learning how to be an activist to know that there's so many accomplished kids out there who are willing to talk about these things. So thank you, panelists, for your bravery and being a part of this discussion. Thank you to those watching. I hope you all learned something on what you can do to be a part of this big change. Be on the lookout for the next Let's Talk Justice Forum, as we're hoping to make it a series. In the meantime, please visit our website at https://www.aacps.org/letstalkjustice for more information. Thank you, and have a very good night.
One more thing also, for comments, feedback, questions, etc., please email letstalkjustice@aacps.org. And once again, Rita gave the website. You can just Google AACPS Let's Talk Justice, and it should come up, and it should have all the information about tonight and how to get further involved in the wonderful organizations that you can get involved. So with that, good night and stay safe, and just keep hope alive.